When the Mafia boss saw the girl lying at the bottom of his steps, he didn't move. She was barefoot, bruised, shaking in the freezing night. His security was already walking toward her, ready to drag her away. To them, she was just another problem that didn't belong there. But just before they touched her, the Mafia boss raised his hand. And everyone stopped, because the girl slowly lifted her head, one eye swollen shut, blood on her lip, and whispered something that changed the entire night. "My father and my brother did this." In that moment, the Mafia boss realized two things. First, she wasn't lying. And second, someone had just made the worst mistake of their lives. They had used his name to sell her. The cold had teeth that night. December in the city didn't ask permission. It pressed itself against the glass towers, coiled into the alleys, turned breath into smoke and skin into something that could crack. The kind of night when even the wealthy moved quickly from car to door, collars turned up, eyes down. Emmerich Lazar was not moving quickly. He stood on the steps of the Ashworth building at 11:14 p.m., adjusting a single cufflink, while three men flanked him like shadows with pulses. The meeting inside had gone well. A Port Authority contract rerouted through shell companies so clean they could pass a congressional audit. 2 years of work. 7 figures. Not a single fingerprint. He didn't smile. Emmerich never smiled when things went well. He saved that for when they went badly, for the men who caused the problem, and then had to sit across from him while he smiled and spoke softly and made them understand how profoundly they had miscalculated. He was reaching for his coat button when the girl appeared. Not walked. Not ran. Appeared. The way wounded animals materialize from the dark, already too close before you notice them. She came from the left, between two parked sedans, barefoot on frozen asphalt. Her feet were a color that didn't belong on a living skin. She wore a dress that had been white once, maybe hours ago, now torn at the shoulder and streaked with something rust-colored along the hem. Her dark hair hung in damp ropes over a face that told a story before her mouth ever opened. Swollen left eye. Split lower lip. A bruise along the jawline that was still darkening, still finding its final shape. Her wrists, both of them, carried marks that looked like they'd been made by hands, not restraints. Someone had held her down. Someone who knew her. Ilias, the closest of Emmerich's 3, was already moving, hand inside his jacket, body angling to intercept. But the girl didn't lunge, didn't reach. She stopped 3 feet from the bottom step, and her knees simply quit. She went down like a building being demolished from the inside. No scream, no drama, just structural failure. Her palms hit the sidewalk, her head dropped, and then, in a voice so quiet it almost lost to the wind, "My father and my brother did that." She wasn't asking for help. That was the thing that stopped Emmerich's hand mid-gesture, the hand that was about to wave Ilias forward to remove her. She wasn't performing. She wasn't begging. She was confessing. The way someone confesses something so shameful, they can barely hold the words in their mouth. She said it like it was her fault. Ilias looked back, waiting. Emmerich studied her for 4 seconds. In his world, 4 seconds was a career. 4 seconds was enough time to read a room, calculate a threat, decide if someone lived or died, metaphorically or otherwise. He saw her hands. No weapon, no phone, no rings. The nails on her right hand were broken in a way that meant she'd clawed at something. A door, a wall, someone's face. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. The breathing of someone who had been running for a long time and had finally stopped, not because she was safe, but because her body had simply refused to carry her any further. "Ilias," Emmerich said, one word, barely a sound. But Ilias stepped back, as if the sidewalk beneath him had turned to glass. Emmerich descended 3 steps. He didn't crouch. He didn't reach for her. He stopped at a distance that was close enough to hear, but far enough that she wouldn't flinch. "Look at me," he said. Not a command, not a request, something in between. The voice of a man who was used to being obeyed but who understood, in this particular moment, that obedience wasn't the point. She lifted her head. One eye was swollen nearly shut. The other was wide open, dark, and utterly clear. That was the detail that changed everything. That single functioning eye held no hysteria, no madness, no manipulation. It held calculation. She had chosen to come here. She had chosen him. This wasn't random desperation. This was a decision made by someone with very few options who had selected the most dangerous one with full awareness of what it meant. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sable." A pause, then as if the surname was something heavier. Voss. The name landed, not on Emmerich. His face gave away nothing, but Ilias shifted his weight. The other two men exchanged a glance that lasted a fraction of a second, which, in their world, was the equivalent of a shouted conversation. Voss. Emmerich knew the name. Everyone in certain rooms knew the name. Harland Voss was a mid-tier operator who ran credit schemes and fenced stolen cargo through a warehouse network in the dockyards. Not important enough to sit at any table that mattered. Not stupid enough to get caught. The kind of man who survived by being useful to people more powerful than himself and invisible to people more dangerous. His son, Tieg, was worse, the kind of young man who mistook cruelty for strength and volume for authority. Emmerich had met him once, briefly, at a function he shouldn't have been attending. He'd watched Tieg laugh too loudly, drink too much, and put his hand on a waitress's arm in a way that made her face go still. Emmerich had filed the observation away the way he filed everything, precisely, patiently, for later. "You need a hospital," Emmerich said. "No." The word came fast, hard. "They'll find me there. They're looking." "Who is looking?" "My father, my brother," and she stopped. The clear eye flickered. Something moved behind it. Not fear, exactly, but the recognition that what she was about to say would cross a line she couldn't uncross. "And a man named Orrin Kedge." Now the temperature changed. Orrin Kedge was not a name spoken casually. Kedge operated in narcotics, human logistics, and private debt collection for people who needed problems to disappear, sometimes the financial kind, sometimes the breathing kind. He was not powerful in the way Emmerich was powerful. He was powerful the way a disease is powerful, ugly, persistent, and willing to destroy its host to survive. "Tell me," Emmerich said, "what Orrin Kedge has to do with you." Sable's jaw tightened. The split lip reopened. A thin line of blood traced down her chin, and she didn't wipe it. "My father owed him money. A lot of money. More than he could ever pay back," she breathed. "So he offered something else." She didn't say me. She didn't have to. "The arrangement was made 3 weeks ago," she continued, her voice flat now, clinical, as if she were reading a police report about someone else's life. "I wasn't told. I wasn't asked. I came home tonight and my things were packed. My brother was in the living room with 2 men I'd never seen. My father told me I was leaving, that it was settled, that I should be grateful because Kedge had agreed to forgive the full debt in exchange for—" She stopped again, not because she couldn't say it, because saying it made it real, in a way that her body, beaten, frozen, bleeding on a sidewalk, somehow hadn't. "In exchange for me." Silence. The city hummed around them. Traffic, distant sirens, the mechanical breathing of a metropolis that didn't care. Emmerich's face was absolutely still. "I refused," Sable said. "My brother hit me. When I tried to leave, my father locked the door. Tig." Her voice cracked, the first and only time. She rebuilt it instantly. "Tig held me down while they called Kedge to come collect me. But I got out through the bathroom window. 2nd floor. I fell wrong. I think my wrist—" She looked at her left hand as if noticing it for the first time. It was swollen, angled slightly wrong. She looked back at Emmerich. "I didn't know where to go." "So you came here." "I came here because of what they said." Her gaze locked onto his. Unyielding. "When my father was convincing me this was done, that I couldn't fight it, he used your name. He said the arrangement had been brokered under the Lazar guarantee. He said Wren was operating with your blessing. He said if I ran, I wouldn't just be defying him. I'd be defying you. The silence that followed was a living thing. Ilias took a half step forward. Emmerich raised one finger, and Ilias turned to stone. He used my name, Emmerich said, not a question. Yes. My name? To sell his daughter? Yes. Emmerich Lazar had been angry before. He had been angry in ways that had reshaped the power structure of entire districts, angry in ways that had ended bloodlines and bankrupted empires. But anger, for Emmerich, was not heat. It was not noise. It was a dropping of temperature so severe that the people closest to him could feel it in their spines. Ilias felt it now. He took a full step back. Ilias, Emmerich said in a voice that was almost gentle. Sir, bring the car, have Nefili prepare the East Suite, call Dr. Cashin, not the hospital, the private line, and get me the Kedge file. All of it? Yes, sir. And Ilias? Sir, no one speaks of this, no one, not tonight, not until I decide what this becomes. Ilias disappeared. Emmerich removed his coat. It was a Loro Piana cashmere overcoat, charcoal, worth more than most people's monthly rent. He didn't drape it over her shoulders. That would require proximity she hadn't invited. He placed it on the bottom step, within her reach. You can take it or leave it, he said. But your body temperature is dropping, and I'd rather you didn't die on my sidewalk before I've had a chance to address what your father has done with my name. She looked at the coat. Then, at him. She took it. The East Suite of Emmerich's residence occupied the upper floor of a brownstone on a street with no sign. From the outside, it looked like an architectural firm or a private medical practice. Clean stone, recessed lighting, no indication that the man who slept 3 floors up controlled enough financial infrastructure to destabilize a mid-sized bank. Sable sat on the edge of a bed she hadn't asked for in a room that was larger than her entire apartment. Dr. Cashin, a gray-haired woman with steady hands and no questions, had set her wrist in a splint, cleaned the cuts, applied something cold and chemical to the bruising. She'd offered painkillers. Sable had declined. The adrenaline will wear off in about 40 minutes, Dr. Cashin had said. You'll want them then. I want to be clear when I talk. Sable had answered, and that was the end of it. Now she sat, wearing clothes that had been brought by a woman named Nefili, a tall, unreadable woman in her 40s, who moved through the house like weather. The clothes were simple, a dark sweater, cotton pants, thick socks. They fit imperfectly, which meant they hadn't been bought for her. They'd been found quickly from whatever was available. That detail mattered to Sable. It meant she was unexpected. It meant whatever was happening wasn't a script. A knock on the door, not a courtesy knock, a real one, followed by silence and waiting. Come in, she said. Emmerich entered alone, no guards, no Ilias. He carried a cup of something hot and set it on the table beside the bed. Not beside her, beside the bed, and then moved to a chair across the room. He sat. Distance, she noticed. Dr. Cashin says your wrist is fractured, not broken, he said. The other injuries are surface level. She'll come back tomorrow if you're still here. If you're still here. Not because you'll still be here. The conditional was deliberate. He was telling her she could leave, that the door was not locked, that this was not another room where decisions were made for her. I'll be here, Sable said. I have nowhere else to go. That's not why you'll be here, she looked at him. Then why? Because you need to tell me everything, not the version you told me on the street. The version you've been editing in your head for the last hour, deciding what to include and what to hold back. I need the full architecture of what your father did, who he spoke to, what documents exist, and exactly how Wren was told my name was attached to this arrangement. She was quiet for a long moment. You're not angry that I came to you. No. You're angry that they used you. I'm angry, Emmerich said, and the word angry in his mouth sounded like a door closing in a vault. That a man I've never authorized to speak on my behalf used my name to traffic his own daughter. Yes, that is the part that requires my attention. And what about the part that requires my attention? Sable asked. Her voice was level. She held his gaze with her one good eye, and there was something in it now. Not defiance exactly, but a refusal to be marginal in her own story. I didn't come here so you could settle a business dispute. I here because I have nowhere safe in this city. Because the man they sold me to will come looking. Because my father and my brother will tell Kedge I ran, and Kedge will not accept that. He doesn't accept loss. No, Emmerich agreed. He doesn't. So what happens to me? Emmerich studied her. She didn't look away. What happens to you, he said, is what you decide happens to you. I am not in the business of collecting people. You are not a debt, an asset, or an obligation. You are someone who arrived at my door with information I need, and I will give you safety while I use it. After that, you will have options. Real ones. That's what I can offer. Why? Because someone used my name to do something I find repulsive, and the most effective way to dismantle what they've built is to keep you alive, visible, and free. Your existence as a free woman is the first piece of evidence that their arrangement is void. It was not a tender answer. It was not romantic or heroic. It was strategic, transactional, and completely honest. Sable picked up the cup. Tea. She drank. Okay, she said. Then I'll tell you everything. The architecture, as Emmerich had called it, was worse than he'd expected. Over the next 2 hours, Sable laid it out with a precision that surprised even Ilias, who listened from the doorway. She wasn't emotional. She was organized. She had dates, amounts, names. She had overheard conversations her father didn't know she'd heard. She had screenshots on a phone she no longer possessed, but she remembered the contents, almost word for word. Harlan Voss owed Orrin Kedge $420,000. The debt originated from a cargo scheme gone wrong. Harlan had been fencing electronics through Kedge's network, and a shipment had been intercepted. Kedge held Harlan personally responsible. The repayment terms were impossible by design. Kedge didn't want money. He wanted leverage. The arrangement was simple, ancient, and monstrous. Sable, in exchange for the full debt plus ongoing cooperation from Harlan's dockyard network, a transaction dressed in the language of marriage but structured as a purchase, and to give it weight, to make Sable believe resistance was futile, Harlan had told Kedge, and then told Sable, that the deal carried Emmerich Lazar's endorsement, that Emmerich was aware, that Emmerich approved, that defying the arrangement meant defying the Lazar operation, which meant defying something that couldn't be defied. It was a lie, but it was a lie built on a truth. Emmerich Lazar's name, in the right rooms, was worth more than cash, more than muscle. It was a currency of fear so refined that even invoking it could end a conversation. Harlan had counterfeited that currency, and now it was circulating. He knows you've never met, Sable said. That's why he used you. You're not someone Kedge would call to verify. You're someone Kedge would believe on reputation alone, Emmerich said. Nothing for a long time. He was seated in the same chair, one ankle resting on the opposite knee, hands folded. His face was a closed system. Ilias, he said finally. Sir, I need 3 things by morning. First, confirmation of the debt between Voss and Kedge. Paper trail, digital trail, intermediaries. Second, every asset Harlan Voss controls, declared and undeclared. Property, accounts, vehicles, warehouse leases. Third, the name and contact information of every journalist, prosecutor, and regulatory officer who has ever shown interest in Orrin Kedge's operations. A pause. All 3, sir. All 3. By morning. Ilias left. Sable watched Emmerich. He hadn't moved. His breathing hadn't changed. His voice had remained at the same pitch, the same volume, the same unhurried cadence throughout the entire conversation. Most people perform their anger. Emmerich Lazar simply organized it. You're going to do something, she said, not a question. Yes, something. Violent, he looked at her. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not a softening exactly, but a recalibration. as if he were adjusting the lens through which he saw her. "No," he said. "Something worse." 3 days passed. During those 3 days, Sable existed in a kind of suspended gravity. The East Suite became her world. 4 walls, a window overlooking a courtyard, a bathroom with a lock she checked every night, and a silence that was not oppressive, but deliberate. No one entered without knocking. No one lingered. Nephili brought meals, clean clothes, and a phone with one number programmed into it. No questions asked. Emmerich was absent. "Working," Nephili said when Sable asked. Which was not often. Sable didn't need companionship. She needed time. Time to let the bruises deepen before they faded. Time to test the boundaries of a place that claimed to have none. Time to sit with the impossible strangeness of being in the home of one of the most dangerous men in the city and feeling for the first time in years something adjacent to safe. She didn't trust it. She tested it. On the second night she went to the front door. It was unlocked. She opened it. Cold air flooded in. She stood there for 2 full minutes, staring at the street, and no one appeared. No guard, no alarm, no hand on her shoulder. She closed the door and went back upstairs. On the 3rd morning she came downstairs and found Emmerich in the kitchen. He was standing at the counter, reading something on a tablet, drinking coffee from a plain white mug. He was wearing a dark sweater and no shoes. It was the most human she had ever seen him. He looked up. "Good morning." "Good morning." A pause. Neither of them knew how to fill it. They were not friends. They were not adversaries. They were 2 people bound by a circumstance that hadn't existed 4 days ago and that had no name. Sable sat at the counter, not close, not far, a negotiated distance. "Your wrist," he said. "Better. The swelling around your eye." "Going down." He nodded, returned to his tablet. She poured coffee from the pot on the counter. For 3 minutes they existed in a silence that was not uncomfortable, just uncharted. "I have something to show you," Emmerich said. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a document, a legal filing, dense with legalese but with a summary sheet attached. Sable read it, slowly. Then again. "This is a fraud complaint," she said. "Filed this morning with the State Attorney General's office. It names your father, your brother, and Wren Kedge as co-conspirators in a scheme involving identity fraud, coercive contract enforcement, and the unauthorized use of a protected business entity's name, mine, to facilitate what is legally classifiable as human trafficking under federal statute." Sable stared at the document. Her hand, the uninjured one, was trembling, not from fear. "You went to the authorities." "I went to a prosecutor named Vesper Ajay, who has been building a case against Kedge's network for 2 years and was missing exactly the kind of first-hand testimony you can provide. I also went to a federal judge named Coretta Haley, who issued emergency restraining orders against your father and brother within the hour. And I went to a financial oversight board that has been waiting for a reason to audit every account Kedge has touched in the last 18 months. He said this the way other people describe their morning commute. "But that's not the part I wanted to show you," he continued. He swiped the screen. A new document appeared. A press release, embargoed but dated for the following day. Sable read it. It was an article, a feature piece, authored by an investigative journalist at a major metropolitan newspaper, detailing how Harlan Voss and his son Tig had attempted to broker the sale of Harlan's own daughter to a known criminal figure in exchange for debt forgiveness. The article named names. It cited sources. It included financial records that Sable recognized. Records that could only have come from the files Harlan kept in the safe behind the panel in his office. Files that Sable had mentioned offhandedly during her account 3 nights ago. "How did you get these?" she whispered. "Your father's safe was not difficult to access," Emmerich said. "His security is aspirational." She looked up at him. "This will destroy them." "Yes. Not just legally. Their reputation. Their network. Everyone they've ever worked with will distance themselves overnight." "Yes. Kedge will." "Kedge," Emmerich said, and his voice dropped half a register, "is about to discover that every asset he holds in this city has been frozen by federal order. His 3 primary accounts were flagged this morning. His warehouse leases are under review. His legal counsel has been informed, through intermediary channels, that continued representation of Mr. Kedge may attract the attention of the Bar Association's Ethics Committee. By this time tomorrow, Wren Kedge will have money he cannot spend, properties he cannot enter, and allies who will not return his calls. He paused. I did not touch him. I did not threaten him. I did not send anyone to his door. I simply made the world around him inhospitable. Sable set the tablet down. Her hand was still shaking. She pressed it flat against the countertop. Why? She asked. And this time she didn't mean, why are you doing this? She meant something larger, something that didn't have a clean question to contain it. Why this way? Why not the easier way? Why use the law when you have the means to use something faster? Emmerich understood the question. Because if I kill them, he said, they become victims. Their story changes. The narrative shifts from what they did to what was done to them. They gain sympathy they don't deserve, and the people who allowed this, the people who knew and said nothing, get to stay invisible. He drank his coffee. But if I expose them, if I let the system they thought they were above crush them under its own weight, then the story stays where it belongs. On them. On what they did. On the daughter they tried to sell and the name they stole to do it. He looked at her. Violence ends a story. Exposure is the story. The article ran the next morning. It detonated across every platform that mattered and several that didn't. The headline was clinical, almost restrained, which made it worse. The details were allowed to speak for themselves, and they spoke in a scream. By noon, Harlan Voss's warehouse leases had been revoked. His business partners issued statements of disassociation, so hastily written they contained typos. His phone number, which had once connected him to a network of mid-level operators and fixers, now connected him to silence. No one answered. No one called back. In the span of 12 hours, Harlan Voss went from being a man with debts and connections to being a man with debts and nothing else. Tig fared worse. Tig, who had always mistaken his father's contacts for his own power, discovered that borrowed power could be repossessed without notice. A video surfaced, not released by Emmerich, but found by the journalist's investigative team, showing Tig at a private gathering, laughing, drunk, describing the arrangement in terms so callous that even the most cynical corners of the internet recoiled. The video went viral. Tig Voss became a name people recognized the way they recognize the name of a disease. And Wren Kedge, who had survived federal investigations, rival operations, and 3 attempts on his life, found himself facing something he had no protocol for. Irrelevance. His accounts frozen, his legal team dissolving, his name in a federal complaint alongside the word trafficking. The people who had done business with Kedge began doing what people in that world always do when the ship takes on water. They swam. On the 4th day after the article ran, Sable received a call on the phone Nephili had given her. She answered, her father's voice. Sable, listen to me. You have to come home. You have to fix this. Tell them you lied. Tell them. She hung up. Her hand was steady. 2 weeks. Sable was still in the East Suite. The fracture in her wrist was healing. The bruises had faded to a yellow-green watercolor that she studied in the mirror each morning, watching them change. Watching her own body process the evidence of what had been done to her, and slowly, methodically, let it go. Plus, she and Emmerich had developed a rhythm that neither of them had designed. Mornings. She came downstairs. He was in the kitchen, or the study, or on the phone in a language she didn't recognize. They exchanged greetings, brief, unadorned. Sometimes she sat in the same room while he worked, reading from a collection of books in his study that ranged from contract law to Dostoevsky. He never asked what she was reading. She never asked what he was working on. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of things neither of them had decided to say yet. One evening she found him on the 2nd floor landing, looking out the window at the courtyard below. Snow was falling, thick, slow, the kind that muffled the city into something almost gentle. She stood beside him, not close. The negotiated distance. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You've been asking me things for 2 weeks. This one is different." He waited. "That night, on the sidewalk, you could have had Ilyas take me away. You could have ignored me. You could have given me cab fare and a phone number and gone home. Why didn't you?" Emmerich was quiet. The snow fell. "Because you looked at me with one eye," he said, "and I could see that you had made a decision, not a plea. A decision. You had calculated your options, identified the most dangerous one, and chosen it with full knowledge of what it might cost you. That is not the behavior of someone who needs to be saved. That is the behavior of someone who has already saved themselves and is looking for ground to stand on." He turned from the window. "I have ground," he said. "I thought I could offer some." She didn't respond immediately. She looked at the snow, at his reflection in the glass, at the distance between them, a distance he had never once tried to close. "You've never touched me," she said. "In 2 weeks, you've never stood closer than this. You've never—" "No." "Why?" "Because your body has been treated as something that belongs to other people for long enough. I will not be another man who decides what happens to it." Something broke open in Sable's chest. Not dramatically. She didn't cry, didn't gasp, didn't collapse. It was quieter than that, a seam giving way. A wall discovering it was tired. She reached across the negotiated distance and placed her hand on his forearm. Her fingers, the ones that still worked properly, rested there for 3 seconds. Then she withdrew. "Thank you," she said. He looked at the place where her hand had been. "You're welcome," he said. And that was all. For now, that was enough. The confrontation with Harlan Voss happened on a Tuesday, not because Tuesday had any significance, but because Emmerich Lazar did not believe in dramatic timing. He believed in preparation, and preparation was complete on Tuesday. So Tuesday it was. The meeting took place in a room above a restaurant in the garment district. Neutral ground technically, though nothing was truly neutral when Emmerich occupied it. The room was plain. Wooden table, 4 chairs, a window with curtains drawn. Ilyas stood by the door. One other man, Emmerich's attorney, a severe woman named Parisa Khoury, who wore her silence like a weapon, sat at the table with a leather portfolio in front of her. Harlan Voss arrived looking like a man who had been living inside a collapsing building for 2 weeks, which, in every way that mattered, he had. His suit was expensive, but wrinkled. His face was gaunt. His eyes moved constantly, to the door, to Ilyas, to Parisa, and then, finally, reluctantly, to Emmerich. Tieg was not present. Emmerich had not invited him. Tieg was irrelevant. "Sit," Emmerich said. Harlan sat. "Let me describe your situation," Emmerich began, "so that we are both working from the same information. Your warehouse network has been seized as part of a federal investigation. Your personal accounts have been flagged for review. Your son is facing criminal charges that his current legal representation is not equipped to handle. Your business associates have, to a person, severed contact. And Wren, the man you attempted to appease by selling your daughter, is himself facing an indictment that your cooperation helped build, which means that if Kedge survives this, and he may, the first person he will blame is you." Harlan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You are, in the most precise sense of the word, alone," Emmerich continued. "And you are alone because you did something remarkably stupid. You used the name of someone who does not forgive stupidity." "I didn't," Harlan started. "Don't." One word. Harlan stopped. "You told your daughter that I endorsed this arrangement. You told Wren that I guaranteed it. You took my name, a name I have spent years building, protecting, and enforcing, and you attached it to the sale of a 23-year-old woman to a man who traffics narcotics and people. You did this without my knowledge, without my consent, without even the basic intelligence to consider that she might run, and that she might run to me." Emmerich leaned forward. "I want you to understand something, Harlan. What I have done to you so far, the legal filings, the press exposure, the financial dismantling, that is not punishment, that is correction. I am correcting the record. I am establishing publicly and permanently that my name was misused, and that misuse carries consequences." He paused. "Punishment would require me to be emotional. I am not emotional. I am thorough." Parisa Khoury opened the portfolio and placed a single document on the table. "This is a signed affidavit," Emmerich said. "You will review it with whatever counsel you can still afford, and you will sign it within 72 hours. In it, you will confirm that the arrangement with Wren was made without my knowledge or consent. You will confirm that you used my name fraudulently. You will confirm the terms of the arrangement in full, including the involvement of your daughter, and you will relinquish all parental claim, financial or otherwise, over Sable Voss." Harland looked at the document. His hands were shaking. If you sign this, the federal prosecutor may remains of your life using means that are remains of your life using means that are entirely legal, entirely public, and entirely permanent. And I will do it on a Tuesday, because that's when my schedule allows. Harland Voss looked at the man across the table. He saw the same thing everyone saw, eventually. The thing that made Emmerich Lazar not just powerful, but different from the men who came before him. There was no rage, no vendetta, no personal investment. There was only a system, vast, intricate, and patient, being applied to a problem. Harland picked up the pen. The night Harland signed the affidavit, Sable sat alone in the East Suite and cried, not because she was sad, not because she was relieved, because the thing she had been holding together, the structure of herself, the discipline of survival, the absolute refusal to break, was no longer needed. The emergency was over. And when the emergency ends, the body does what it's been waiting to do. She cried for 40 minutes. Then she washed her face, drank a glass of water, and went downstairs. Emmerich was in the study. The door was open. He was writing something by hand, actual pen on paper, which she had noticed he did when something mattered enough to slow down for. She stood in the doorway. "It's done," she said. "Yes. What happens now?" He set the pen down. "Now you decide. Parisa has prepared several options. There is a relocation fund, untraceable, yours, no conditions. There is a contact at a firm that handles identity protection for people in vulnerable situations. There is a standing offer of testimony coordination with the federal prosecutor, which would provide additional legal protection, and there is time, as much as you need. And if I want to stay?" The question sat in the room like a held breath. "Then you stay," Emmerich said. "The East Suite is not being used for anything else." "That's not what I'm asking." He knew that. She knew he knew. The silence between them had been building for 2 weeks, not a silence of avoidance but of recognition. They had both been watching, both been careful, both been waiting for the moment when the crisis receded. Enough to reveal what was underneath it. "I know what you're asking," Emmerich said, "and I won't answer it tonight." "Why?" "Because tonight you are processing something enormous, and anything I say will be heard through that filter. I want you to hear me clearly, so I will wait." She looked at him for a long time, then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Then I'll wait too." She turned and walked back upstairs. At the landing, she paused. "Emmerich." "Yes?" "The way you said my name in that document, Sable Voss, you said it like it meant something." "It does." She went upstairs. He picked up the pen. The snow continued to fall. Spring came slowly, the way it does in cities that have endured hard winters, not as a single event, but as a series of small surrenders, ice releasing its grip on railings, light lasting a few minutes longer each evening, the smell of something growing somewhere beneath the concrete. The case against Wren moved forward with the inevitability of gravity. Sable testified twice, once in a closed deposition, once before a grand jury. Both times she spoke with the same clinical precision she had used on that first night, and both times the room fell silent in a way that had nothing to do with procedure and everything to do with the weight of what she described. Harland Voss cooperated, not out of conscience, out of arithmetic. The deal Parisa had structured or offered him reduced charges, in exchange for full disclosure, and Harland, who had always been a man of calculation, calculated that survival was worth more than dignity. Teague, who had no such instinct, refused to cooperate and was charged accordingly. His trial date was set for autumn. Kedge's empire didn't collapse so much as evaporate. Without access to his accounts, his network atrophied. Without legal cover, his operations became visible. Without the myth of invulnerability that had protected him for years, he became what he had always been underneath, a man who had built power on fear and whose fear had finally been pointed back at him. He was arrested on a Wednesday. Sable watched the footage on the evening news. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter, something that felt like the end of a long illness. She stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go. She did now. The relocation fund was real. The identity protection was in place. She had options that hadn't existed 3 months ago, options she had built with her own testimony, her own precision, her own refusal to be erased. She stayed because of what happened on a Sunday in April. It was morning. Sable was in the courtyard sitting outside. He stood for a moment, then sat outside. He stood for a moment, then sat on the bench, not at the negotiated distance. Closer. Still not touching, but closer. "I have something to tell you," he said. She closed the book. "My mother," he said, "was a woman who married a man she believed was powerful and discovered, after the wedding, that his power was the kind that requires victims. She stayed for 11 years. She protected me for 11 years. And then she left, not because she stopped being afraid, but because she decided that her fear was less important than my future." He was not looking at her. He was looking at the wall, at the light. "She died when I was 19. Heart failure. The doctor said it was genetic. I believe it was cumulative. That fear held long enough becomes a physical event." He paused. "I tell you this because I want you to understand that what I ate with one eye on that sidewalk. Not you're with one eye on that sidewalk, not your situation, you, the decision you had made, the cost you were willing to pay, the fact that you didn't ask me to save you. You asked me to witness what had been done." Now he looked at her. "I have been many things in my life, Sable. Some of them I am not proud of. But I have never been a man who looks away from someone who refuses to be invisible. That is not a virtue. It is simply who I am." Sable sat with this. The courtyard was quiet. The sunlight moved the way sunlight does, slowly, indifferently, illuminating whatever it touched without preference or judgment. "I'm going to say something," she said, "and I need you to hear it without turning it into a strategy. I'll try. I don't see you the way I saw you that first night. On the sidewalk you were a calculation, the most dangerous option that might also be the safest. In the kitchen that first morning you were a system, efficient, controlled, impersonal. But here, now, on this bench," she stopped, started again, "you're a man who just told me about his mother. And I think that's the bravest thing you've done since I've known you. Braver than the legal filings. Braver than the confrontation with my father. Because this, you can't control." Something moved across Emmerich's face. Not a smile, not a crack. Something tectonic, deep, slow, and irreversible. "No," he said, "I can't." She didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for her. They sat on the bench in the first real sunlight, and the distance between them was no longer negotiated. It was chosen, and it was smaller than it had ever been. This is not the end. Orrin Kedge awaits trial, but trials can be delayed, and delay is the territory of the desperate. Harlan Voss cooperates, but cooperation born of self-interest is not the same as change, and Harlan Voss has never changed in his life. Teague Voss sits in a holding facility, nursing a rage that has no outlet, building a narrative in which he is the victim, waiting for someone foolish enough to believe it. The world that created this story is still spinning. The machinery of debt, coercion, and inherited violence does not pause because one woman escaped and one man chose not to look away. there will be more nights, more decisions, more moments where the line between power and restraint is so thin that only the person standing on it can see it. Sable Voss is 23 years old. She has a fractured wrist that healed slightly crooked, and a scar along her jawline that will fade, but not disappear. She has a room in a brownstone on a street with no sign, a standing appointment with a federal prosecutor, and a library of borrowed books she is steadily making her own. She does not call herself a survivor because she doesn't believe the thing she is surviving is over. She calls herself present, here, in the room, in the conversation. At the table, Emmerich Lazar is 32 years old. He controls enough infrastructure to reshape the financial landscape of a city, and he chose to use it not to destroy a man, but to expose one. He sleeps 3 floors above a woman he has never touched and may not touch for a long time, and the distance between them is not a failure of desire, but an exercise of the only kind of power that matters, the kind that gives power back. There is a question that lives at the center of this story, and it is not what happened. What happened is on the record. It is in affidavits and press releases and frozen accounts and courtroom testimony. The question is, what kind of man do you become when you have the power to do anything? Do you take? Do you punish? Do you own? Or do you stand at a distance chosen by someone else, in sunlight you didn't create, and wait, and patiently, deliberately, for as long as it takes, for the moment when she decides on her own terms to close the gap? The snow is gone now. The city is waking up. And the story, like all stories that matter, is not finished. It's beginning.